Welcome to Access to Perspectives Conversations, the podcast for bridging academic landscapes. At Access to Perspectives, we provide novel insights into the communication and management of research. Our goal is to equip researchers around the world with the skills and enthusiasm they need to pursue a successful career. You will get insights around the topics of scholarly reading, writing and publishing, career development, project management and research integrity, all embedded into open science practices. Learn more about our work at accesstoperspectives.org.
And welcome to our new episode with today's guest, Friederike Rohde, working at the Berlin Ethics Lab for Responsible Technology. And the responsible use of technology we're going to talk about today is artificial intelligence, and in particular the environmental implications and side effects or downstream effects of the use thereof. So I'm very happy to have you on the show today, Friederike. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today.
And yeah, as your affiliation says with the Berlin Ethics Lab for Responsible Technology, so you're looking at artificial intelligence from an ethical point of view. And to get us started, could you explain a little bit about your background, what got you there to the ethical analysis of technology and now artificial intelligence specifically? So what's your research background? What piqued your interest in AI and sustainable research that you do now?
Yes, as I have a background in sociology and science and technology studies, so I was always interested in this interrelation between technology and society. And when I started working in 2010, I was working on issues like sustainable management, corporate social responsibilities, and things like this. And then there was the time when this issue of smart cities came up. So how can we use digital technologies in cities in order to mitigate climate change or optimize water, waste treatment, energy, and stuff like this? And that got me a little bit more to the point of what is the how can we use digital technologies and what is the impact of digital technologies? How are we negotiating about how to use digital technologies in cities? And then I was also interested in digital technologies in the energy system. And that's also what I wrote my PhD thesis about. How do we conceive of futures about smart grids and smart home? And what imaginations are there existing? What are different actors expecting from these technologies, and how are they try to align those kind of technologies with goals that are, for example, sustainability or other goals which might be comfort or convenience, especially when it comes to the smart home. So I was working in a research group which was dealing at this nexus of digitalization and sustainability. And in this research group, I was writing my PhD thesis. And they also were engaged in the Bits and Bäume network, which is a network between different kinds of science, civil society, and tech organizations which were trying to put this issue on digitalization and sustainability on the agenda. And within this activities, we also talked a lot about the issue of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and we also get to know many organizations which were working on this issue. And we got to know this NGO Algorithm Watch, which also was working on the issue of working on the issue of artificial intelligence, and also many social aspects like discrimination and stuff. And we talked about them about what about artificial intelligence and sustainability? So what about not only the social aspects and impacts of artificial intelligence, but also the environmental impacts? And then we developed the idea of to write a proposal for a project to develop sustainability criteria for artificial intelligence along the life cycle. So try to look at artificial intelligence from the sustainability perspective. What does that mean? So what kind of criteria should be fulfilled in order to develop this technology in a more responsible and perhaps also sustainable way?
Maybe we're stepping a bit ahead in our conversation for today, but have you identified, well, first of all, recommendations, but also are there already criteria in place to ensure sustainable development of AI technology that certain companies, some of which we now very much know the names of because they're so prominent, are actually deploying, or is that a hope for the future to be adopted?
Well, I think if we look at like the whole set of criteria which we developed, it's not like that every kind of this criteria are in place, but I think some of this criteria are also about to get in place, for example, because of the AI Act in the European Union, because there are many obligations on how to make risk management, risk assessment, and like try to define what are vulnerable groups and stuff like this, documentation, and also some small parts which are related to the environmental impacts, which is the documentation about energy use of training when it is a high risk AI system or it is a general purpose AI system, referring to the definition of the AI Act. So there were some parts integrated which related to the environmental issues. And yes, and we were also trying to provide like some insights for this kind of decision-making process in order to tell them, yes, we have to include also the environmental impacts because they're really huge and they really matter, and we really need data in order to get to know what the problem is all about.
Okay, let's briefly talk about the numbers. So even before the mainstream use of AI technology that we're looking at today, people were happily embracing technologies with using the internet, browsers of several sorts, search engines, which already had a significant amount of carbon emission and energy consumption that came along. Like, was environmental sustainability a big discussion already, like say 5 to 10 years ago before the release of ChatGPT, or like is that now a new dimension where the urgency is much higher? And probably both. I don't know. But what's your insight?
Yes, I think it depends a little bit if we are talking only about artificial intelligence or about digitalization more general. I think the debate on like digitalization and sustainability dates back like I think 15 years or stuff. So perhaps also longer, where people started to do investigation and stuff on what are the impacts of digital technologies also regarding environmental impact. So I think this debate is much older, and also this kind of green coding debate and stuff. So I think these debates already existed like 10 years before. But what came to the table when people from research and also from AI development realized that there's a real huge amount of energy used to train those machine learning models, then the debate also regarding artificial intelligence shifted to this issue of environmental impacts, because there was already this debate on what are the societal implications of artificial intelligence, what are the risks regarding like discrimination and stuff, and bias and all those debates. And then in 2019, there was published a paper from Emma Strubel and certain other colleagues, who tried to came up with some numbers on how much energy this would consume to train a large language model. And yes, they realized that it's a lot. So for example, the training of ChatGPT amounts to 1,248 megawatt hours of energy, which is really a lot. And then there came up the debate about, like, should we really use this kind of technology everywhere when it's so resource intense? And the energy is also only one part of the problem. There are also other resources like the hardware, the mining, and also the water usage from the data center, which is an issue I think is currently also coming more into the debate.
So just to grasp what that means, can you give a non-digital reference of maybe something like how many planes going from Berlin, Germany, to the United States does it take to emit a similar amount of carbon, if that's even possible to compare with one task or a chat prompt?
Yeah, it's like, it's not that easy to say it for one chat prompt, because for one chat prompt the amount of energy used is like really, really, really low. It's like 0.000 whatever. So because this is the training, and the training is something which is done most of the time, like one time training, refining, and all the stuff. And then you have the inference phase, and the inference phase is the use phase where the model is used. And in this phase, you don't use that much money, but you do this millions of times. And that's why this also amounts to a huge, so this also accumulates to a huge amount of energy use. And what is also the case, or what I at least read, that the newest model of OpenAI also uses many energy in the inference phase. So I think the number that I read was about 1,785 kilowatt hours, so which is like roughly the amount which a German household uses a year per task. So this is really
that's
a number which we have to worry about. So if this amount, if like there's a, okay, this megawatt hours per training, we can say, okay, that's not good, but we don't do it that often. Like normally we do it one time and then we reuse the model for the purpose we want to use it. But when we now arrive at an era where these AI models also use very much of energy in the inference phase, so per task, then our problem gets even bigger, because we see a really raising amount of energy used by data centers, and also increase in data centers, growth in data centers. Many data centers are built, and also increase in water usage. So that is a real big problem. And if we go on a path where the models are even larger, then we really have a big problem in the future.
Okay. What about so what solutions do you see to reduce or to minimize, mitigate, or eliminate the environmental negative side effects that come with AI?
I think there are several ways to improve, I think, or to reduce the environmental impacts. What one side we could look at is like the infrastructure side, like the data centers. One path could be to use more renewable energies, but this is also done by many large tech companies. But then we still have the problem of water usage, so which is like a really scarce resource, and it's not that easy to come up with a solution. In some countries, for example, in Chile and I think it was Nicaragua, they renegotiated the building of data center in order not to use water cooling, but air cooling. because for air cooling, it's not that energy efficient. So you need more energy, but you don't need that much water because they are built in region where it's really water stress, and that's a really big problem. And there were also protests against this data centers, and that's why. So you could shift, for example, from water cooling to air cooling. But in Germany, for example, at the moment, there's another way. They saying, okay, our aim is energy efficiency, and that's why we are shifting from air cooling to water cooling, because it's much more energy efficient. So renewable energy is one path, but I think it's also not the only solution, because if the amount of energy we use is ever increasing, we don't get that amount fulfilled by renewable energy. That's obvious, because we don't have that much space to build all the photovoltaic and power plants and wind mills and stuff. And one problem which is really important when it comes to data center infrastructure is the waste heat. So there are produced lots amount of heat, obviously also because of the hardware needs to be cooled. And it's very important that it gets proper cooling, because otherwise the hardware has to be exchanged very often, which is like expensive and also not good for the environment. So we have to think about how to use the waste heat, and there are also some examples where the waste heat is used for several parts.
Yeah, let's look at some examples that I've come over. First of all, the one that I told you about before our recording. So the server that I'm renting is located like to host my website, like our website, Access to Perspectives, and many of the digital use and system tools and systems that we use is located in northern Germany. So they use a wind farm to operate the data center, and the waste heat that you just mentioned is used for an algae farm on top of that. So the heat warms water in which algae grows, which is then used for food consumption and as an additive or as a kind of superfood or whatever. So it goes into the food supply. So now that's an example of circular economy. First of all, is that a model that you see also elsewhere that's scalable, given political and economic will?
Yes, I think, well, whether it's scalable or not, that also depends on how the infrastructure is embedded in this local or regional or city context. I think there are many examples, good examples of how to use the waste heat, especially, for example, also in Germany, in Frankfurt, there's an example where there's used waste heat for housing and stuff.
Also, many universities use that. I mean, not many, but it's kind of a growing thing for universities who have their own data centers to use the waste heat for the warming of the building, like the heating infrastructure.
Yeah, so I think there are some of these examples, and this is a way to go. And there
I can hear a but. Is there a but? You're skeptical.
Well, I think the but is that with an ever increasing energy demand, I think also the problem will not be solved by using waste heat, because if we really want to reduce our environmental footprint, we also have to reduce our overall energy demand. And I think that's the whole issue. So if there are built constantly new data centers and there's an ever increasing amount of energy use, that's a really big problem. So I think we nevertheless also have to look at how to reduce the energy that is used for those machine learning.
Here's an idea that just popped up in my head many years ago when I was a PhD student, not so many, well, relatively many years ago. When I was a PhD student, I convened a symposium for PhD students where we talked about global changes, amongst which also global change. And then we had one professor presenting about nuclear fusion. And hasn't that been a thing going on for decades now with lots and lots of investments? And it sounds as if AI is calling for nuclear fusion to get to its kind of finally be functional. But it's not that I'm advocating for it. I was skeptical then. I'm still skeptical. Do we really need like a never-ending source of energy besides the sun? Is that even good to put into people's hand? I don't know. But now that we have the demand with AI, maybe it's time for nuclear fusion to pick up there. I don't know.
Yes, it's like I'm very skeptical of all this idea, and I think because it also fuels this kind of techno-optimism perspective, like every problem we create through technology, we can solve it through another technology, and I think at the end this won't work because, and I'm not an expert in energy, in fusion energy, but I don't think that we are really at a stage where we can use this technology. And by the way, I think it's also a very high risk technology.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I wasn't.
And if it's used, for example, as an argument to prevent like expanding renewable energy, then I think it's really critical to go on this path. So I think the best way is like to proceed with integrating renewable energy, because this is not only good for this kind of digital technology world, but also for any other things related to energy use, because it's a really good way to decrease the carbon footprint and the primary fossil fuel need, which stems from the energy production.
So where do you see the responsibilities to make responsible decisions in the development and usage? I mean, that's already giving you the platform to say everyone is responsible. So us as users, first of all, what can we do?
Well, I think the users are not the ones who are in the first place responsible. I think in the first place responsible are the companies developing those technologies, because they should make sure that these models are built in a way that they don't need that much energy. So they should be compressed, or they should build smaller models. For example, there's also development of tiny models, which are really, really small models, which need like very, very less amount of energy. And also, I think there's also a movement on more task-specific models, because like the more task-specific the model is, that's at least something a machine learning developer told me, the less the energy we need to use for it. So I think they have a really great responsibility regarding how the whole models are configured and how they are trained and all that stuff. I think that's really important, because I think for the user, there are very little instances on how to decide what kind of technology to use, because I can't see what kind of energy or other social impacts this technology does have. So that's why I think it's not easy to decide, like, should I use this or that or those? That's not possible, because I don't know how much energy is used if I type in a prompt. So it would be nice, because then perhaps the people would think about more if they, for any kind of purpose, they should use this machine learning technology, but that's not the case. So I think the responsibility is at the side of the developing companies, and also like on the side of the people who are deciding on the framework, like on the political framework, because you can set rules that incentivize building models that are not that big, or at least tracking, measuring the energy demand and other environmental aspects which are related to those models, because it's not only about energy, it's also about other resources like indirect resources, mining for the hardware and all that stuff. And I think one really important step in order to get to know how and where the impacts are occurring is to get more transparency along the whole supply chain, like the developers, but also the manufacturers and all that stuff.
You mentioned also that in your study, and now there's several thereof, you've you've assessed the whole workflow from developing artificial intelligence solutions and systems and components to the usage, and then all the aspects, like you said, like providing the components for the physical setup, but also the downstream effect and the energy consumption, which is now a major environmental and often also or increasingly debated downstream effect or after effect. So, but now at this point, as you said, there's not much choice we have considering environmental solutions and options, but there are AI providers and solutions available that differ with regards to which are more or less socially responsible and more or less looking at the socio-ethical aspects with regards to biases in how or conscious and unconscious biases and how the systems are trained. But then isn't it also often on the customer or the user to hold the developers and the providers of the tools accountable and then kind of have a indirect dialogue of, okay, why don't you use that? Yeah. Like I just don't wanna us users get off the hook so easily, basically, but
Yes,
yeah.
yes, but I think, and that's also which we try to make a little bit more clear in the Bits Employment Network. It's also not fair to like shift all the responsibility to the user of the
No,
technology.
yeah,
Because like that's also not the issue. Because like yes, what we are saying is like perhaps you think about not to only decrease your footprint, but to increase your handprint. What means that take political action in order to like force the people you vote for that they make right legislation for the companies. But what I think is also important is the innovation and technology policy. I think with this kind of policies, like how are the funding schemes working for AI development and all this stuff, I think with this you can make a really big impact, because then you can set incentives, or you can say like, okay, if we are funding this kind of AI development and there's a lot of funding for it, then you should be aware how to develop your model, and you should be aware of all this kind of sustainability issues. You should track those stuff. You should provide a model card where you define all that stuff, vulnerable groups and all those things, and where you put your energy demand and stuff. So I think the technology innovation policy is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of the solution, because there you can really influence how researchers but also startups are developing this kind of technology.
Yeah, to provide the frameworks and incentives on a national, regional, and international level.
Yes, and what I think is also important, and I think that's also what is an important aim of the Berlin Ethics Lab, where I'm actually working, that you try to talk to people, that you try to
sensitize.
Yeah, that you talk to people, that you sensitize people, and that like in the earliest possible stage try to make them aware of what are the ethical implications, what are impacts regarding sustainability, what are the social and environmental impacts of this technology. And that's also something which we are doing, because we are, for example, working together with the Kiez. This is an AI accelerator at the TU Berlin, and we're providing workshops for them in order that the developers at those startups know a little bit more about what does it mean to ethically reflect upon this technology development and to think about the impacts.
Yeah, no, that's really important work, and thanks for mentioning that. We will also add the links in the show notes and reference materials. And I mean, it's fresh since yesterday in the news, and by the time the podcast releases, a few more days will have passed, and we'll see how the discussion evolves. But with a new legislation in whichever country, no names to be mentioned, there's now a massive announcement. Okay, so in the United States, in the new Trump administration, there's now there's been the announcement of Stargate AI project, already raising frictions with competitiveness inside the United States, let alone what that means for the AI regulations in the European Union, and then downstream on the national level in Europe and around the world. So why I'm mentioning that is that also now that many, like one country after the other, is turning to the national elections, it's an opportunity for our citizens and users again to study the strategies and the recommendations of each party, and that's a way how we can very relatively directly through our vote also steer the development of AI on a national level and then also regionally to hold ourselves and each other accountable, and the companies who are developing that. There's so many questions in my head. Like now with this monopoly with OpenAI, first they announced it as like public good, but now it's commercialized again, back and forth, accusations and collaborations, mergers. There's a lot.
I think that's also an issue of sustainability, because, like, for example, in our criteria set, we also had like kind of economic criteria, because like a monopoly is also not sustainable in an economic sense. So if those technologies are not accessible for small and medium enterprises, then that's also not sustainable from an economic perspective, because like this whole kind of concentration of economic power that really, well, makes the problem worse. And I think the issue of that there's so much money and so much invest in this technology that makes it really hard to influence it, because like the companies, the large tech corporations are investing very, very much money for all the infrastructure and stuff, and they will invest more in the next year. So it's like their power is raising, and yes, I think such a project is also increasing the concentration of this power.
Yeah, just okay. We're trying to find a way to conclude, but I'd love us for I would very much like for us to tap briefly on the increasing use of AI technologies inside academic workflows. I don't know. Like, I was gonna ask, so what do you think about that? Like in publishing, but also in data analysis. So there's different steps, literature search. There's a lot of services now available. It's also covered, like we discussed it also in our trainings, and a lot of scholarly institutions are providing rooms and holding space for these discussions to happen. What's your impression or observations, and do you have recommendations here on the actual use of AI inside academia and academic workflows?
Well, I think that, well, it is used in several ways in academia, also for data analysis and stuff. And I think in many cases there are many helpful tools which really can help to like improve your data analysis or stuff, or help you to do like to grasp what is the important literature for my topic. But there's also a risk. I think that people rely too much on the results of this technology, because I think research is also about like navigating between different kinds of perspectives and scholarly schools and like scholarly debates. And I think when you're a researcher, it's really important that you know how this kind of debates work and how to navigate in those debates, and also to grasp like what is the difference between this and this perspective. And I think that's a really important skill or competency you should have as a researcher. And I think we should make sure that people don't lose this kind of, I think, creativity, which is also part of the research process. So I think there are many good ways to use this kind of technologies, but I think we should be also aware that they like do not make the whole research process so, I don't know, standardized or stuff like that.
Standardized and also still understand what's happening. So AI in its application shouldn't be a black box for us to just press a button and then deal with the outcome and use it for interpretation, but instead, especially as researchers, but also as informed citizens, making that's also what I convey in my trainings, that we need to know the actual handmade process behind, like what's actually happening as you ask that question or press the button with a prompt.
Yes, and I think it's also an issue of, they call it like epistemic injustice. So what are the knowledge resources which the machine learning algorithm uses in order to get this result? So these could be, for example, only these resources which are available, which are open access, or I don't know, or
of course,
so it's like, or which are easy to access, which are perhaps in English. So it's like, so there are also many issues related to justice and injustice and what kind of research is referred to. And I think that's also a really important problem. Like, what are the kind of like fictions, like from also epistemic perspective, which relate to this, to the use of these technologies. And I think there are also many institutions, like funding institutions, but also universities, which are providing guidelines on this. And also the European Union, the ERC has also guidelines on this, which are living guidelines because they also have to be developed.
We learn as we go.
But I think that's also a raising issue, and I think that's also interesting. So what does that mean, using this in knowledge production? Yeah.
I asked you that before. Do you want to give in like your personal view? Do you see opportunities in that we actually learn how to use AI and technology and digital tools responsibly anytime soon? Or will it be a long, painful learning curve?
Well, I would say it's not only about learning to use them responsibly, but also to design them in a responsible way. So like, it's also about the design of the technology, it's also about the deployment, and then it's also about the use. I think there are many options. And I think also the issue that now this technology is used in, like, for example, also in universities and stuff, that is also a chance for the universities to try to focus on these technologies which don't have that large environmental footprint, or for example, open source technology. So I think this is also a chance to foster the development of these technologies, which are not like only this proprietary kind of technologies which are developed by companies like OpenAI. So it is a chance, and I think also the development of, like, for example, tiny models, or how models can be compressed and all this stuff. It's also, I think that's also that's also an issue which, well, is worth further investigation. But still, I think the whole debate of global and climate justice still is, well, to my perception, in its infancy. So it's like, that's not that much debated in all this AI and sustainability field.
I want to highlight a paper I wrote with a colleague, Louise Besodenhout, on the varying openness of digital open science tools. So not yet tapping into AI, because we released it in 22, I think. It was around the time when ChatGPT was released, was it? Or 23? But the paper was before the hype of AI. Just so to say, looking at digital tools that are being used in the scholarly workflows for the purpose of open science and to democratize research practices. But then we highlighted how, even though it's presumably for open science, it's not really, because regional, first of all, connectivity issues. Do you have access to the technology in the first place? Second, regional political prerequisites. So not every researcher in every country on the planet is actually legally enabled and allowed to use the tools, based on political sanctions that happen and then the after effects. So there's a few things. And then also when it comes to development, it's important to recruit developers, tech developers from all parts of the world, to take these specificities into account and build them into the infrastructure of the technologies to make it work for a global society. And then again, like, yeah, should it be a monopoly to lead the way, or should it be democratized and open source? I think, like in many other examples, we see a little bit of both. I tend to compare it like a natural ecosystem where you have predators and carnivores and herbivores, and everybody has their role to play. But then the trick is to have a balance of things and thoughts. And I think it's important for people like yourself and your team in the Berlin Ethics Lab for responsible use of technologies to advocate and sensitize, and yeah, each of us to play a role and to stay informed and make informed decisions and usages of the opportunities that present themselves. And keep talking, because we keep learning, and ignorance is not helpful. But then, yeah, there's is like, yeah, let's leave it there. There's so much more we could talk about and tap into, but the discussion will certainly continue.
Yes, I'm sure it will.
So thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the work done already, and again, it's really good to know that teams like yours exist, where you're working and with similar initiatives. So yeah, for that, see you around. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us to listen to this episode. Do let us know what you think. You can email us or connect with us on our social media channels, which you can find on our website at accesstoperspectives.org. Email us at info@accesstoperspectives.org or book a call to explore how we can support you with your research planning, management, and publishing. Welcome you again soon for our next episode. Until then, have a great time.